Now,
Okay.
so good morning, everyone. I am really excited about today's professional development. We're going to be talking today about standing in humanity, why Black Lives Matter. We're going to specifically address tool tips and resources for creating a more inclusive class. And I'm really proud and I'm really excited because actually today we have a special speaker. Her name is London. She's a close friend of mine, and then she's actually the founder and president of Bell Global Justice Institute. London Bell, actually, she doesn't live here in LA, so that's the beauty of technology. She's a native Detroiter, and then she's a lawyer, community organizer, activist, and humanitarian with a specific educational training in international human rights, law and policy, and international business and trade law. London has focused her career advocating for policy changes on behalf of diverse communities. So then we're gonna welcome Lon, who is gonna drive us to today's topic.
Thank you.
Do you want me to play it? Yes?
Yeah. Huh?
It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling. It's like, how do you tell somebody how it feels to be in love? How are you going to tell anybody who has not been in love how it feels to be in love? You cannot do it to save your life. You can describe things, but you can't tell them. But you know it when it happens. That's what I mean by free. I've had a couple of times on stage when I really felt free. What freedom is to me, no fear. I mean, really, no fear. If I could have that half of my life, no fear. Lots of children have no fear. That's the closest way, that's the only way I can describe it. That's not all of it, but it is something to really, really feel.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you. I am so excited to be with you all today. And those are the words of the late, great Nina Simone, a brilliant musician and civil rights activist. And she is one of my favorite people in the world. And I think she says pretty much what Black Americans feel. Has felt for centuries here in the United States. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement and its misconceptions, and then go into some tips and tools for you all. So starting out, what is the Black Lives Matter movement? And so many of you may recall Trayvon Martin, who was killed by a man named George Zimmerman back in 2012. And on July 13th, George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin was an unarmed teenager walking home from the store in Sanford, Florida. And so Black Lives Matter was born that day because Black people around the country have just been, I don't know, just the exhaustion of seeing this happened over and over again. And Black Lives Matter was actually founded by 3 Black women, Patrice Con-Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi. And so I'm gonna just read its mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on Black communities by the state and vigilantes. By combating and countering acts of violence, creating space for Black imagination and innovation, and centering Black joy, we are winning immediate improvement in our lives. Next slide, please. So Black Lives Matter is global. It is global. It's an international movement with headquarters in the US, UK, and in Canada. There have been protests around the globe. You've seen that particularly since Memorial Day with the murder of George Floyd. There were protests in all 50 states and more than a dozen countries. Black Lives Matter is based on 13 guiding principles, and those are diversity, globalism, Black women, Black villages, loving engagement, restorative justice, collective value, empathy, queer affirming, unapologetically Black, transgender affirming, Black families. It is intergenerational. It is member led with a network of 40 chapters around the globe, and it is a nonviolent civil. It practices nonviolent civil disobedience and protests against police brutality and other policy issues that impact the human rights, civil rights, and dignity of Black people. It is a grassroots organization as well, focusing on local leadership as opposed to national leadership. Next slide, please. So, there are a lot of common misconceptions about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I have a list here. This is not a complete list, but this is just a start. And if you see, there's words here in pink. Is that pink? And I just want to kind of go over the three most common, the bigger misconceptions about Black Lives Matter and give you some more insight. So one of the misconceptions I'm going to cover is the movement is a violent hate group, meaning that the movement hates white people. And so to say Black Lives Matter is not saying white lives do not matter or that it's an anti-white assertion. There's actually an additional word that is unspoken and implied, and that word is too. Black Lives Matter too. Therefore, it is a statement of inclusion. It is an affirmation that we also matter. It is a statement that underlines the fact that white lives are treated with more inherent value. And the movement demands that America affirms the value of Black lives and makes a commitment to addressing the systemic issues that continue to oppress Black people around examples such as access to housing, equal access to quality education and healthcare, police brutality and excessive force, and the pipeline to prison and prison industrial complex. Okay, and then the next misconception that I'm going to go into more detail about is that the movement does not care about Black on Black crime. So the short response to that is, this is false. In fact, in cities around the country where the majority of the community is Black, there are groups such as neighborhood watches, law enforcement, community partnerships, business, civic, and church leaders, and youth groups working to disrupt and intervene, disrupt or intervene on Black altercations before they actually escalate. So in Detroit, for example, there are many crime prevention groups, including one that is very popular called Detroit 300. And it's a group of Black men that come together to assist the Detroit Police Department on crime cases and to help protect women and girls, women and children in Detroit. So last summer, there was actually a serial killer in the city of Detroit killing women. And Detroit 300 responded by literally going through neighborhoods, patrolling neighborhoods, and going through abandoned houses one by one, looking for this person. And with the help of Detroit 300, Detroit Police Department was able to apprehend this suspect. And so that's just one great example. Another example is the Detroit Police Department's LGBT liaison group. So there were members of the LGBT community, mostly Black and Latino, that have partnered with the Detroit Police Chief's Neighborhood Liaison Unit to address issues of violence within and against the LGBT community and people of color. So they have been working together. They have a very strong relationship. Detroit Police Department is very involved in community projects here in the city. And so, you know, the idea that Black people don't care about Black on Black crime is just not true. In fact, I am also a community leader, and I work in partnership with other community leaders to ensure the safety and well-being of our communities and to ensure that these issues are addressed. I am a member of the FBI Detroit Citizens Academy Alumni Association. So I work directly with the FBI as well as other community and business leaders to keep them connected to our community and to address any issues that we may have. So for people that argue that Black Lives Matter does not care about Black on Black crime, also fail to acknowledge that most crime is intraracial. For instance, 93% of Black murder victims were at the hands of Black people. 84% of white murder victims were also at the hands of white people. Another reason why Black Lives Matter really focuses on violence committed by law enforcement, and in particular white law enforcement, is because, for example, so this past Sunday, there was a tragic event that happened in a Detroit restaurant, Coney Island here. 3 people were killed, unfortunately, were shot by a Black person. And it was just really sad because 2 of them were related, and it's just been really sad. So, however, with the great work of the Detroit Police Department, by Wednesday, that person had been apprehended, charged, and arraigned for these crimes. So that's great work on behalf of Detroit police. However, Breonna Taylor, as you may have heard, was killed on March 13th. She's a young Black woman, first responder. She was shot and killed while she was asleep in her own bed by officers executing a search warrant. The officers were at the wrong house and they were searching for the wrong person. And even when she was shot and was struggling to breathe, I've recently learned, she received no medical attention from these officers and she died. They entered her home with no warning or identifying themselves at all. It's July 24th, and those officers have not been charged for her murder, even after weeks and weeks of outcry from the global community. So as you can see the difference, when there's Black on Black crime, it's more likely that the Black suspect will be captured and prosecuted and the whole process. But as you can see with this case of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and other cases, when there has been a crime committed against a Black person by law enforcement or vigilante group, it's dragged out for months and sometimes years. So the last one I want to sort of focus on is the movement hates police officers. The short answer to that is that's also false. I will say that I'm actually the niece of a fallen police officer, a fallen Detroit police officer. My favorite uncle was killed in the line of duty. He was on the force for 12 years. And, you'll find that many activists have family members that are police officers. I work very closely with police officers in the community. So that is just a false narrative. And just to give you some historical context around the idea of policing Black people, it actually started as a method to capture and return enslaved people back to their masters during slavery. What is called as slave patrols were first formed in South Carolina in 1704 and lasted for over 150 years and technically ended with the abolishment of slavery, right? But the influence of these slave patrols, however, remained. And there are parallels between slave patrols, which were legalized groups and vigilante groups like the KKK, that has continued to commit extrajudicial killing and the terrorizing of Black people from the start of Reconstruction through the height of lynchings during the 30s and 40s, and even today. After slavery ended, Southern police adopted many of the tactics of the slave patrols, and these included, but are not limited to, systematic surveillance of the Black people, of Black people's movements, and the enforcement of curfews, in addition to not following through and helping to capture criminals that have committed crimes against Black Americans. But even with all of that said, Black Lives Matter is not anti-police. In fact, Black Lives Matter knows the inherent value of police lives and their families, and we understand their sacrifices. However, Black Lives Matter does strive to make police work less of a threat to Black people and reinforces the idea that if a Black person questions why they are being stopped or asserts their rights, this is not a sign of disrespect or resistance. We have the same rights under the Constitution as every other person, and we know our rights. Black Lives Matter also rejects military-grade weapons as appropriate ways to engage any community, and it demands accountability from law enforcement to respect the rights of citizens. So shooting a person in the back, as what happened with Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta, in line at Wendy's, is just not an example of proper policing to Black Lives Matter, and that's the reason why you see the protests that you see. So I wanted to just highlight those three because that's where I see a lot of discussion around the misconceptions of Black Lives Matter. Next slide, please. These are our beautiful founders of Black Lives Matter, and they have made this a global movement, and we're very proud of them. Next slide. So I took some time and I created this, and I just wanted to put the names of people who have been killed by law enforcement or vigilante groups throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Many of these names you do see that are maybe familiar, some of them may not be, and these are just names that I know of. And so I just wanted to put names to this discussion today. Next slide, please. So the question of why Black Lives Matter, this is more than just a local issue in the United States. This is a global issue, and Black Lives Matter under international law and customs as every other life in the world. And so I'm just wanted to just refer you to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, international laws and customs. And if you're not familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, I do have that link to the goals in the sources section. And, all of these, international mechanisms are designed to protect the rights of all global citizens, and we are included in that. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through this list in its entirety. This is not a complete list of some of the issues, the human rights situations of Black Americans. These situations may change throughout the Black diaspora, but these are some of the things that, Black Americans are trying to overcome. And, it's very difficult, but Black Lives Matter and other groups, we're all working together to ensure that Black people are able to live, enjoy the human rights and live dignified lives. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go over some tools, tips, and resources for a more inclusive class. And I am speaking from the perspective of a student. I have my bachelor's degree, I have a law degree, and then I went back to school to get an advanced law degree in international human rights law and policy and international business. So as a student, I looked to my professors to provide inclusive, diverse coursework and have an inclusive environment. And this is what I wanted to see more of in my classes. Many may have heard of Kimberly Crenshaw. She created the term intersectionality. Intersectionality is a framework for understanding the ways that multiple aspects of our identities intersect, influence one another, and compound to create unique experiences. The concept is regularly used to describe the ways that societal privilege and oppression is complicated by the different parts of our identity that are marginalized or privileged in society. So my first, suggestion is to create your curriculum in your classroom from an intersectionality framework. Next slide, please. So as you work to create your curriculums, consider that the subject you will teach from multiple viewpoints. Your students will learn and understand your coursework through an intersectional lens. You will have students that have multiple identities that will identify through gender, sexual orientation, ability, nationality, and even socioeconomic status. As you can, consider an intersectional approach to your curriculum, this can really create a more inclusive classroom, and it can ensure more diversity and inclusivity, and it can give students a feeling of having a safe space where they can really thrive. I think communication is key. I would even suggest adding a statement on your syllabus, or even saying your statement out loud on the first day of class on diversity and inclusion. And next slide, please. This is a great diversity statement that I found from Genesee Community College in New York. And I have the link here and in the sources page. And I'll just read it. In this classroom, you will be treated with respect, and I welcome individuals of all ages, backgrounds, beliefs, ethnicities, genders, gender identities, gender expressions, national origins, religious affiliations, sexual orientations, abilities, and other visible and non-visible differences. All members of this class are expected to contribute to a respectful, welcoming, and inclusive environment for every other member of this class. Something like this, whether you put it in your syllabus as a statement or you say it out loud at the beginning of your class, it will be a game changer for students, particularly students who may identify as genderqueer, who may have a hidden disability or invisible disability. You just have no idea what kind of tone that will set for your classroom. Next slide, please. So, of course, the more open you are, I think at the beginning of class and even in the middle of the semester, as a reminder of your diversity and inclusivity, intentions, it will really just enable students to bring, their whole selves to the classroom, which will absolutely enrich the dialogue and the coursework. And examples of using inclusive language could be important as well. So, instead of starting off the class saying, hello, ladies and gentlemen, use terms like hello, everyone, or hey, folks, to be inclusive of all genders and genderqueer identities. Ensuring the policies around disability and accommodations at your institution translates clearly in an affirming way to the classroom. So, for instance, between the time that I went and pursued my law degree and my LLM, I was not only an older student by the time I, went to get my LLM, which is the Master of Law. I also had developed a disability. And, my classes were sometimes on the 8th or 9th floor. And, it's busy in a law school, in a law school. So, sometimes the elevator would go out. Most people could just hop on the stairway, and take the stairs or, but for me, that wasn't an option because I had a disability. So just creating, affirming atmospheres and being empathetic and patient with students who may not be able to follow along with what everyone else is doing will make a difference. Continue with an intersectional approach to any media or any material or activities you choose to take, and try to avoid any negative stereotypes or triggering any experience of historical violence or oppression against certain groups. And so you might be thinking, well, how would I know that? And that's where it would be very much to your advantage to just try, learning about more about different cultures. And I have some information to share with you on Black American culture later. Next slide, please. So, honoring the presence of and creating an affirming environment for non-native English speakers, in your coursework, consider the calendar of celebrations and global religious and cultural observances. And And then in understanding intersectionality, take into consideration that your student makeup may be intergenerational. As I was saying, I was an older student when I went back. And so I was working with a lot of students who were years and years younger than me. Some students may be parents, you know, or primary caregivers. Some, you know, may be having other issues going on. And although you may not know what those are at the time, every college student isn't the same. So creating this atmosphere of inclusion may help students feel comfortable coming to you in office hours and telling them more about themselves, telling you more about themselves. And that would help you understand the influence or impact their participation and perspective in your classroom. That doesn't always translate between professors and students. And so it would be great if that could happen within your classroom setting. Next slide, please. Okay, so of course, I'm sure this has probably been discussed previously. Understanding your own biases, we all have them. There's nothing to be, you know, scared about or ashamed about in that, because we all have them. And just work through them as you design your curriculum. And just, you know, taking note on your own understanding of different cultures and languages and practices. For example, and this is based on an experience that I had. If there's ever a discussion in your classroom or a project around heritage or lineage, and your students begin sharing, or even you begin sharing, you know, where you are, where you're from in the world, please keep in mind that Black Americans may find this difficult. And the reason being is because most Black Americans are descendants of enslaved persons here in the United States. And we are unable to trace our heritage beyond the southern plantations due to the Atlantic slave trade. So there may be, you know, many of us don't know the origin of our African ancestors. And we, you know, I had an experience where I was in one of my Master of Law courses with Juris Doctor students, and there was the question of, you know, where everyone is from, and because we're in an international law class, you know, so people were talking about, I'm from Spain, I'm from, the Netherlands, my family's from Ireland, and I'm just fascinated by where everyone is from. And the one thing that was different for me at that point is that I knew where my family was from in Kentucky and Georgia, but it had just so happened that a few months before I had just done an ancestry DNA, and I learned my origins in West Africa. So I was able to participate in that conversation. But had I not done that, I would not have been able to. And that wasn't the first time I had been in conversations about lineage. That was just the first time I was able to talk more about where I was from, and that was in 2012. So that's just an example of something that I've been through. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you about effective ways to support the Black Lives Matter movement. And, you know, you've seen a lot of the news and just a lot going on, and, you know, it could feel very overwhelming. And it's like, where do I start? How do I be a part of the change or be on the right side of history? There are so many things that you can do. The first thing that you can do is affirm publicly and privately that Black lives do indeed matter, and be intentional and unapologetic. And for some, because of the misconceptions about Black Lives Matter, there have been negative connotations attached to it. That could be a scary thing to do, but it's a necessary thing to do. You know, speaking up when you see injustices, advocating for law and policy changes, definitely supporting local Black-owned businesses, particularly those led by Black women and queer and transgender people. Supporting local NGOs that are Black-led, particularly women, and by women and queer and transgender people. That would be through grants, donations, and volunteering. Next slide, please. And, you know, for the university, strategically partnering or continue to strategically partner with Black-owned businesses and Black-led NGOs, non-governmental organizations, inviting them as subject matter experts at various events, particularly around intersectionality in Black life, you know, particularly around issues of disability, youth, elders, socioeconomic status, environmental justice, and it could go on. Advocating for more inclusive language, of course, and policies, and of course, adding more inclusive language into your curriculums. Being an ally, checking in on friends and family. Next slide, please. You know, continuing to educate yourself on issues of racism here in this country. Making sure you use your power to vote. And I want to zero in on your buying power. You know, you can use your buying power to demand so much change. Demanding inclusive, equitable labor practices from your favorite businesses, demanding more diversity and leadership at your favorite businesses, and also making sure that you're connecting with your local Black Lives Matter chapter, your local NAACP chapter, and the Black fraternities and sororities. They are a wealth of resource and information. Next slide, please. So I have some films and books for you all personally to, if you're interested in learning more, that you could watch. Many of these films are on Netflix. I noticed that the cable stations here have made many of these films available for free because of what's been going on recently in our country. So these are just a few books and films. I would say if you want to start anywhere, Netflix has a documentary called 13th. And it's a documentary about the 13th Amendment of the US Constitution, abolishing slavery. And it is a really very important documentary and how it connects to Black life and the pipeline to prison. And it was directed by a Black woman, Ava DuVernay. And then jump on over to When They See Us, which is also on Netflix and directed by Ava DuVernay. And it tells the story of the Exonerated Five, which you may know of as the Central Park Five, the 5 young Black boys, Black and Latino boys in New York that were wrongly convicted of rape of a white woman. And so their youth was, you know, taken from them. So those are 2 very good places to start. Next slide, please. Dark Girls is also an important documentary to watch, and it does talk about colorism in the Black community and privilege, lighter skin privilege. You want to learn more about that. The Rape of Recy Taylor talks in detail about Recy Taylor, who was raped by white men, and they were not ever prosecuted or put into jail. Actually, the person who was doing the investigation is Mother Rosa Parks, when she was a part of the NAACP, I believe. Next slide, please. And then these are just some books. Definitely White Fragility and the New Jim Crow. Next slide, please. And these are just a continuation of books that I would highly recommend that you look into. Anything by Maya Angelou and James Baldwin and Audre Lorde, that's, yeah. And then the podcast, that's really an easy thing to do. It's 1619, hosted by Nicole Hannah-Jones from the New York Times, and it talks about the moment that enslaved African people hit the shores of the United States all the way to today. Next slide. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Isabel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, London. And we have a great overview about the 13 principles We also learn about misconceptions. We learn about some potential tools, but now the question is, what about design? What can we do about design? And Black design matters. And this is what we're gonna touch base right now. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some examples, great designers. Antoinette Carroll, she's a great designer who's actually using her power of design into educating people, to creating more to reduce inequality, to say it in a way. And the way that she's addressing this is by telling us the power of design is that we're capable of design anything, including a system and a more fair and justice society. So moving forward, another great example is Elizabeth Keklit. What is interesting about her is that actually she was born a slave, and then she started working really hard, and then with all her determination, she actually became the personal seamstress of the First Lady, Mary Todd Lincoln. And then what happened is that, of course, she started working, designing, and then also she became an activist. And then she started educating and empowering other Black women, African-American women, and then she helped them to overcome. Moving forward, Anne Lowy. Anne Lowy is an iconic designer. She was actually started designing one-of-a-kind piece, and then she was really best known for designing Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress. Moving forward, we have Zelda. What is beautiful about Zelda is that she was actually the first Black person to own a store. She owned a boutique. She opened her own business in Broadway, Manhattan, and then what she did later is that she started empowering other women, teaching them how to sew and how to move forward with the design, the passion, and their dreams. Paul River Williams is an architect, which is really interesting, is that we're familiar with his work, even though not as much. He's actually well known for influencing the Southern California architectural style. And then he's actually the person who was behind the design of the space age theme that we see here in the LAX. So that monumental piece, so iconic in the LAX, he's actually the mind behind that. And in 2017, he actually became awarded with the AII Gold Medal for his architectural work. What is beautiful about Julie Burks is that she's actually, she was named by Forbes, one of the 30 under 30. So she's a young women that she's really empowering and blending the power of design and technology. So then she created an app that what it does is that it's able to have an algorithm for researching and recognizing pieces. And then she's actually working with companies such as Google. Moving forward, we have Timothy Hikes. So then Timothy Hikes is more into the graphic design. He's more into the user experience, and his work is being so influential, moving forward and promoting diversity. And then he's been working a lot with Adobe. Another example, we all know Rihanna. So Rihanna, she started kind of raising questions about creating more inclusive design. She started her Fenty Beauty, where she actually incorporated the 40 shades. And she said we need to be more thinking about all the diversity that we need. And moving forward, the lingerie. So then she created her line of Savage, and then is actually empowering women with the different shapes and sizes that we have. So if I may ask, I don't know, I see like a noise, Barbara, I think Barbara, okay. Moving forward, Eddie Opera. So Eddie Opera, he is a graphic designer, and then again, the beauty of his work is that he is blending design with technology, and his work, it can be right now, is a part of the permanent exhibition at the MoMA. And Ruth F. Carter, I think we're all really familiar with her. She was actually finally got her Oscar award for her costume designs, even though she was nominated 3 times. And then finally, with all her work and her creativity, bringing all the diversity and the beauty of the designs of the Black Panther, she was actually finally recognized. And I wanna, as London was telling us, one of the powers that we have, besides being an ally, is also the power of buying. So then we're putting together here a list that all of you can access and then know about. We have a local guide of Black-owned business in LA that you can actually support. We have different array from coffee stores, bookstores, health and wellness. So then also by using the power of buying is another way that you can exercise and be part of the solution. So let me close today let me go back. We're almost there. We always, and this is beautiful. This is something that London has, and it's beautiful that she always dedicates her presentation. London?
Yes, thank you, Isabel. So yes, I always dedicate all of my presentations to someone. And so today's presentation is in honor of Madam C.J. Walker. I saw in the comments a discussion about the movie on Netflix. So yeah, watch that film. Madam C.J. Walker was an American entrepreneur and philanthropist, political and social activist, and she's recorded as the first self-made American woman millionaire. And she created a line of hair and cosmetic products for Black women. She was the daughter of enslaved people, and she is the first person in her family born free after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. So, Madam C.J. Walker, and Black Lives Matter. And
Black Lives Matter.
Also, we love to say with people like Madam C.J. Walker, have you all ever heard of the term Black Girl Magic? She is Black Girl Magic. So thank you, everyone.
So from here, we want to take a little Q&A to learn a little bit about if you have any ideas, any questions about how we can make our classes more inclusive. And then remember this TED Talk about how we can actually design our systems. We can incorporate more equitable design. And we actually, as instructors, we have that in our hands. We can actually empower our students to shape the future that we really want. So thank you so much. And I'm gonna, as I mentioned, I'm gonna open right now to any Q&A. Kara, go for it. You can unmute.
Hi, I'm Kara.
Oh, Kara, sorry about that.
I sent out to the general studies instructors, and I'm happy to share with anybody else who would like it. Just go ahead and email me or PM me. A colleague of mine put together a visual timeline of historic hairstyles of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I'm happy to share that with anybody. I also have a bunch of fashion history images of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and I can pull those out of my presentation and put them in a file if anybody would like me to share those. But I wanted to kind of touch on the issue of equity because it's something we're talking about in theater a lot. And it's not something that we have any direct control over, but I think that we need to think about it as partners in this industry, and that is the problem of unpaid and low-paid internships and how those lock out low-income people, women with children, and particularly it affects people of color. And this is a big issue that the theater world is wrestling with right now, and I think that's just something we kind of need to be aware of as our students come to us asking about internships. And we all know how often businesses take advantage of interns, and I think it's just something to kind of put in our awareness.
Definitely. Kara, thank you so much. And then yes, for sure, if you can actually share that information with us, I will make sure that we can include it in our professional development side that we're going to be sharing with all of you in the near future. We're actually working on that material right now. So anyone, any comments, any ideas, go Mona.
Sure. I just wanted to remind everyone that, because I talk about it a lot in my class, we've built algorithms, AI, into everything we do, and that is being written by white men, mostly. And so we need to be sure, whether it's how we shop or how LinkedIn works or all of this, that we don't realize that it's not just designing what we see, but it's designing everything that's kind of running the business and the world we're in. And it's a very important topic. And it's certainly the Amazons and Facebooks and everyone in the world don't want you to talk about it, but think about that all of our biases are being written into the way we build these algorithms in, which then further the bias, okay? And so we talk about it in entrepreneurship, okay? And they'll say, well, this is how it's been done before, so we're gonna do it that way again, but it's how we shop, it's how we go through and fill out a form for healthcare, it's in everything, but it's being built in because of AI and algorithms. And so it's just an important thing that may not be visible, but it's the mechanics of so much of what we do.
Absolutely, Mona, thank you so much. Luis, I see your hands, and then Ariana.
Here. So I just noticed a lot of brands now, when you go to their homepage, will have a header on what their stand is from a corporate social responsibility, what they're doing about inclusion, about diversity on their staff. In fact, I was on Lululemon's site this morning, and they have a whole list of steps that they're taking into consideration as they redevelop their structure. But I would encourage students to take a look at brands that they love and see what they're doing. And it's not just about Black-owned businesses, but what are those other businesses doing too to support these causes? And are you willing to support that brand because of their policies on these things? So starting to see a little more transparency on some of these topics, but something to share.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Then we go with Ariana and then Gwen.
Hi guys. One thing that I thought of a couple weeks ago when all this stuff started coming up, and I would encourage other people to do it as well, is to go through your lectures and see what the imagery looks like. Are the images of white people exclusively or mostly? So just do a little auditing of your own lessons and just see if you can work just a little bit harder and find some stock photos that are a little bit more inclusive, and also including Black people, but not just Black people, but other people of color too. You don't want it to just be Black and white. So make it reflect the true diversity that we really do have at FIDM.
Yes. So before going into Gwen, I actually want to share something really quick. I do have a class I used to teach Applied Math, and then one of the topic was tessellation, which I know Ariana is really familiar with. So they were trying to teach students about how a pattern or replicating different shapes, you can actually create a more efficient pattern, even for fabric and then designing. So I used to have an activity for Barbie, and I used to ask my students to design an outfit for Barbie. And then besides bringing the material, I actually brought my models. And this was one of my models that they can actually recreate and do the pattern. And this was my other model. So this was, for example, one of my activities. And then it's already there. It's a statement that I'm doing. And I have to admit, my students always used to get so excited when they can choose what they want. And right now I actually have my Barbie with a prosthetic, and I have my Barbie in my wheelchair. So then go, Gwen.
Oh, sorry. I was so taken by what you were saying, Isabel, that I didn't realize you called on me.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to say to both of you, thank you so much for this presentation in London. Thank you for your time. FIDM is creating a course on diversity, and I would love to contact you outside of this London, because the information was so invaluable, and I would love to hear your perspective. And also, and maybe this was my oversight, but in the 13 guidelines, I didn't see Black men included in Black Lives Matter. And I know for my Black male students, I think that's going to be brought up in class, and I just wanted to hear the perspective on that.
Yes, actually, I'm glad that you brought that up. So Black Lives Matter it addresses the lives of Black men, women, and children. And so one of the reasons why the women that founded Black Lives Matter is very intentional about Black women is because the previous movements, human rights and civil rights movements, tended to be Black male focused, Black male centered, where the leaders were Black males, and oftentimes Black women were sort of in the background as, with secretarial roles, and didn't really have a chance to be at the forefront. And so this organization wants to reaffirm the participation of Black women in its guiding principles, with also the understanding that Black men are absolutely a vital component. In fact, many of the protests that have happened and the large turnout have been around the murder of Black men by law enforcement or vigilante groups. And Black women still feel invisible. For instance, for George Floyd, for what happened to George Floyd, you could see millions of people were in the streets, but not so much for Breonna Taylor, who was killed in Kentucky. So there's still some, you know, I don't know if the word is tension there, but we want to see more of a focus on Black women as well. But yes, Black men are absolutely included in this movement. And so you can definitely reassure Black male students in your class.
Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect. I'll go.
Share a quick comment.
Mm-hmm.
In class last quarter during the protests, I know that unfortunately many of us weren't able to talk to the students about what was going on with the protests just because of the way the class was structured or because of you know, just needing to get through curriculum. But I teach a class where I was able to engage with them, and the amount of compassion and sensitivity across the board and coming together of our FIDM students cannot be denied. They have such a strong moral compass for social injustice, and everyone of all races and gender identities was coming together for Black Lives Movement. I had a student who is a white student who went to protest with a Black friend of hers. The police started harassing her Black friend. She stood between the police and her friend, took a bullet. So we were saying, wow, you could actually say you took a bullet for a friend. And then in the discussion, a Black student said she was afraid to go to the grocery store, and that same student said, give me your number, I will go to the grocery store and get you groceries, when she was recovering from taking a rubber bullet. And I mean, these are the types of students we have. So I just, you know, wanted to put that out there for everyone to know that we really do have amazing students who want so badly to engage in a diverse, inclusive learning environment.
Okay, so I'm gonna take Marcus.
Thanks, Isabel. It's Cheryl Marcus, but of course I haven't figured out how to change it to
that.
Cheryl Marcus. And those who know me like Louise are hysterically laughing. A couple of comments that really resonated with me besides thank you for a fabulous presentation. I love, London, what you did at the very end, where you dedicated the presentation. And I would invite all of us to look at whether or not there's a possibility of dedicating at the end of each lecture or presentation that we do to somebody whose Black life mattered, or in fact, any person of color. And one of the things that came to my mind is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the fact that he could be highlighted at the end of a lecture, dedicating it to him and his positive voice in this cause. So that was something in all of this, London, that I thought to myself at the end of, I mean, I do a ton of presentations across, you know, 3 days of fashion, and I'm doing one for the people that go out into colleges. I'm doing one for student activities, etc. And what a beautiful thing to end each of a lecture or presentation with a dedication. So I thought that was awesome. Number two, I wanted to just comment on something Ariana said. You know, our students are very, very sensitive and committed to this. However, it was very interesting because Tom Selinsky and I are co-teaching what we do every summer, which is the National Retail Foundation Student Challenge. And we're doing it this quarter over Zoom with 2 teams of 3. And one of the students put together an image board. And interestingly enough, the student was Asian. And one of my comments to her about her vision board or her mood board was that she needed to add more diversity. So don't always assume that their desire and their feelings really manifest itself in the classroom. And the very last thing I wanted to ask, but because I'm a technological moron and Thurlin Anderson and I were trying for 20 minutes for me to get onto this, is the entire presentation going to be available to view? And if so, where and how?
Yes. So thank you, Cheryl. Thank you so much for asking that. Yes, the entire presentation, the recording, and the PowerPoint with all the tools, and hopefully what Kara is going to send us, we're going to put it together. So then currently, as I mentioned at the beginning, we actually are creating a faculty professional development that is going to be a file that you can go and access different materials for all the professional development that we have done so far. So we're currently creating the material, and then once it's done, hopefully in the near future, which I hope is going to be pretty soon, we're going to be able to share that with everyone.
And you
I
will
really
communicate to us when that's available for viewing?
Definitely,
Perfect.
definitely. We'll let you guys know where it's going to be available. And I want to thank everyone for attending. So today we were talking about the standing in humanity, why Black Lives Matters, and especially how we can design a more equitable society through design. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your participation today. Thank you, London.
Thank you. Thank you.
This was amazing.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Isabel, I sent the file, the first file, to you and Gwen already, and then I'll put together the second file because I have to pull it out of my other presentations. And I'll go ahead
Perfect.
and
Did you do
forward
it
that.
in a here? Did you do it on Zoom, or can you do it on using our emails? Or
Yeah, I sent it to you in email.
Okay,
I sent it as an
perfect.
attached file. So you've got
Excellent.
it here and make one, and I'll
One
put
thing-
together the fashion one for you.
Excellent. Go, London.
I want to say one last thing for anyone that wants to reach out to me for any additional information.
I will
or
send
for
you your
other, Isabel, you have my information, and my information is on the PowerPoint.
Yes, definitely. So I will do that, guys. I will share, of course, the PowerPoint with all the tools and London's information. So if anyone has any question, if you want to, you know, with her it's great because it's a safe environment. You can ask her anything. That's a good thing. You can be really honest with her, and she can say, no, that's not going to work. You need to change that language, or do this, you know, and I'm saying it because I'm being there and she has helped me with that. So I really appreciate her help.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Bye-bye,
Okay,
everybody.
London. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you, everyone.
London, is she gone?
No, she's gone.
Oh,
But I can
fine.
send you.
Isabel, I have to
you
share
want me
with
to send you?
London. My
Tell me.
great uncle wrote the song "Strange Fruit," which was produced, which was sung by Nina Simone. That's my
Yes.
great uncle.
Yeah, let me tell you this one. That was something that we did, and we thought about putting that song, but you know, again, but she
And
loves
I
it.
have.
Wasn't
She loves that
Strange
song.
Fruit?
You know, she's gonna go crazy. So I need to put you in contact with her. She's
Because-
gonna be like, "Oh my God!"
Wasn't
Okay,
Strange
and I
Fruit
just-
sung by Billie
and
Holiday
I-
first?
Huh?
I think Strange Fruit was sung by Billie Holiday
Billie
first.
Holiday, Nina Simone, and then Kanye kind of butchered it.
Yes,
But
yes. It's
I have a
beautiful.
I found in my mom's stuff a book of poetry, and I'm gonna share with you, Isabel, so you can share.
Yes,
But
definitely. If you guys
there
share
are
with me,
things
we
here
can
from the
spread that
30s
to the whole
and the
faculty.
60s that are as if they are relevant for everything we're living through today. And it was my great uncle who wrote under the pseudonym Lewis Allen.
Oh wow! Yes, yes,
And
Mona.
so I literally found a book written to my parents, you know,
Oh,
like
wow.
and I have one of only 40 copies of
Yeah.
this book.
Oh my goodness.
But what he wrote in the 30s and then the 60s
Mhm.
is as if, and I'm just going to bore you guys for a short one because I have to, okay? Bore you guys but what he writes about education and what he writes about, it's as if today we should be doing this. He wrote about education. Got hit by a club, got kicked by a horse, learned from a cop who uses force. Didn't read no pamphlet, didn't hear no speech. A cop's club had a lot to teach. Force and violence saw it all around, democracy trampled and clubbed to the ground. Saw the beating freedom took, won't read about that in my civics book. That was
Wow.
written by my great uncle, and he's got many
Wow.
that were, some are from the 30s, some are from the 60s.
Mhm.
It's still so relevant. Like
It
we
is
can read
relevant.
it to students today,
Yeah,
and they would probably think someone wrote it recently.
yeah.
So I don't own the copyright. My cousins, I've told them they need to put this back out there because I can't. It's not my copyright to do,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sharing it because it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And he really was quite a talented man. And again, he has a much longer story, but he's my great uncle. And while going through boxes of mom's stuff, I found this,
Wow.
and his children had forgotten about it.
Yes. Yeah.
They had forgotten that it even existed. And
Yeah.
Strange Fruit is quite famous.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote The House That I Lived In, which was recorded by Frank Sinatra, which has paid the rent their whole life. But really quite amazing. And so I found this in Family Treasures.
Wow, Mona, you have quite something out there. So thank you so much for sharing. And then for sure, I'm gonna share your information with London. She will
Please,
love to hear
because
that. Oh my God, I
it's
know.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just
She loves
as
that
if it
song.
was today.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was published in 1968.
Great.
Some of it was written in the 30s, but Strange Fruit was written in the 30s.
Mm-hmm. So if you have anything else that you can share, of course, without violating any, copyrights.
I can share it, and
Yeah.
he has said I can share it.
Okay,
I
perfect.
just don't want to be the principal voice. I would contact then London with my cousin who
Definitely.
owns the copyright.
Yeah,
Does that
you
make
can do
sense?
that. Yeah. Yes, you can copy them, and then we'll take from there. Excellent. Thank you
Because
so much.
it's amazing. And again, I knew about the house that I lived in growing up. They told us about the Frank Sinatra. I didn't know about Strange Fruit until, and that one, if you don't know that is an amazing poem which became a song.
It is.
Heart-wrenching song.
It's strong.
Right.
It is beautiful and strong. It's really, yeah.
Written by, like I said,
Nina.
so it's, performed by Nina Simone
Mm-hmm.
and Billie Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they called my my great uncle was they called him a black poet. And so because he's a Jewish guy from New York, and
I love it. I love it. Mona,
Yeah.
could I reach out to you and see if maybe I could get a copy of that poem?
Yes.
For the class?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And there's a couple more, I don't want to bore you now, but there's a couple more that are just particularly just, impactful. So,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to little by little, and again, London, because if you look at some of the writing, some of the music that's coming out now, certainly Strange Fruit is just someone other than Kanye do it, please. We don't like his version, but prefer Billie Holiday's version.
Great. So I have to go, guys, but it was great having you again. I really want to thank your participation. And as I mentioned, we're going to have all this information available.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank
putting
you
together
so much.
another great professional development presentation, Isabel.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwen. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
I'm going to copy here what it was on the chat because couldn't access it. Perfecto.